It's time to lock in. We're talking SEC, college football, and more. This is AP as we see it.
I'm all about that action. I'm all about that action. I'm all about that action. I said I'm all about that action.
I'm AP Stedham from LA. That's Lower Alabama. This is AP as we see it, a syndicated weekly 1-hour show discussing the Southeastern Conference, keeping an eye on the national football scene and other sports. We'd like to direct our audience to all our social media platforms at AP as we see it and also at AP Stedham. That's on Facebook and Instagram and our X account. We have our YouTube channel for our video broadcast weekly at AP Stedham as we see it. And also the audio is archived on Spotify. And you can check your local listings for radio stations in the South. They usually broadcast it on Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. And then also on our YouTube channel, we have all the interviews that we've conducted at the various events. Last week, we had a chance to speak to University of Alabama head football coach Kalen DeBoer, and we spoke to Auburn University head football coach Alex Golish. This week, we're going to be making a journey over to Thibodaux, Louisiana. You say, why Thibodaux, Louisiana? Well, that's Nicholls State, and it's the 30th annual Manning Passing Academy, and we'll get a chance to visit with as many SEC quarterbacks as we can within the allotted 45-minute time limit. And then we also try to talk to quarterbacks from the other leagues, the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Big 12 and other conferences. Notre Dame quarterback is usually there as well. So we're going to go over that list in this first segment. Our guest this week is Blake Toppmeyer. He's from USA Today Network. He's the senior national college football columnist, and we're going to be discussing the proposed legislation, the Protect College Sports Act, and also some of his projections for the SEC 2026 season. We know that's a lot of fun. We know that it's all fluid because you have injuries during the season and different players emerge. Quarterbacks, as we saw last year, the second-string quarterback for Ole Miss, Trinidad Chambliss, beat out Austin Simmons, and he became one of the best players in the conference, if not the country, at that position. But we'll have a lot of fun with Blake Toppmeyer in segment 3 and 4 from the USA Today Network, the senior national college football columnist. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Greer's Markets, 29 locations in Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi, serving the Gulf Coast and beyond for 110 years. Think about that. 110 years. That's how many patrons have been with Greer's Markets all those years. They just love Greer's Markets. You can find so many items. Remember now, they have Lucy's Famous Recipes. They're online. You can purchase her book as well online at the store itself. Family, friends, football, basketball, baseball, softball, all those sports that you watch with your family and friends. That's a winning tradition at Greer's, where you can score big savings on fresh meats, produce, and more for your game day spreads. Now, if you can't make it to one of those 29 locations in Alabama, Florida, or Mississippi, click on the groceries to go. You can have those items delivered to your home, your office, the venue of choice. They have the apples for bring them to the counter and receive credit for your school. Excuse me. They have the coloring contest for the children as well. Check those weekly ads. They have the Greer's Gold weekly digital coupons. You can scan the code or click the link, and you can become eligible immediately for those savings. Like I said, every week they have those savings on the weekly ads. But remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it. Greer's got it. They guarantee it. Every time I walk into the store, I find some item that's new on the shelf, and I'm so glad that I'm shopping at Greer's. So remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it. So let's proceed with our show right now. Oh, and the segment 2, we're going to discuss our own preseason pair of favorites that we have, a couple favorites we have to win the conference, and also a surprise team at this point. We're going to give you our our ideas and observations about the two favorites in this surprise team as well. But first, we want to delve into this Protect the College Sports Act. And one of the things I found interesting in researching about the Protect the College Sports Act, which was passed 19-9 in the subcommittee of bipartisan approval, 19-9. The organizations that support the legislation, it's about 20 plus conferences, plus it's the NFL, the NBA, the Major League Baseball, the NFL Players Association, the NBA Players Association, the American Football Coaches Association, the National Association of Basketball Coaches, the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee as well also supported the proposed legislation. And then I also found it interesting that, of course, the Big Ten and the SEC are opposing the legislation, but there are head football coaches and head basketball coaches on that list from those conferences supporting the Protect the College Sports Act. So the SEC and the Big Ten, they're opposed because of the media pooling rights. I don't think they want to share their profits with any of the other conferences, and also the no super conference. The legislation prevents having the super conference. So I think that's two of the primary motives behind the SEC and the Big Ten. I'd like to see them share that revenue just like the NFL does when it started way back. And I keep bringing up this historical reference of Pete Rozelle became the commissioner after being the PR person for the Los Angeles Rams, and they had these independent contracts around the country with the television broadcast rights. And he said, no, we're going to get together and have one contract. And we know what happened with the NFL. They expanded exponentially, and the TV revenue was flourishing for everybody. So I'd like to see the college football with their 130 plus teams have the one contract and make a lot of money and be on all the networks. That's another thing. I like to see and hear all the voices of college football on the major networks and other networks as well, to be a part of broadcasting college football and college sports in general. So that's something that I hope would happen. Maybe it's a fantasy on my part. It's wishful thinking that the Big Ten and the SEC will relinquish their profitable operations to be part of college football across the country, and it will have a strong regional representation all over the country. I think that's what made this sport great. We had the different regions competing against each other. And I was so disappointed that Pac-12, as we knew, it disbanded, but we know that it has a resurgence now with the different teams because they have the 2-year window to add the teams additionally that presently it was in the state with Washington State and Oregon State, but they have another group of teams. So now you're going to have that Pac-12 come back to life, but not in its past form, of course. And that legislation, when it was passed, it was 19-9. There were 13 Republicans, 7 Democrats supported it, and the no category, there were 6 Democrats. I'm sorry. There was it was 13 Republicans said yes, 6 Democrats said yes, and in the no category, the 9 was 7 Democrats and 2 Republicans said no. So that's how it worked out. But we know that it has that month of July to be passed by the Senate, the House as well. It was a short window. We don't know what's going to happen, but we're hoping for the best. We're going to be headed to the Manning Passing Academy, as I stated, and we'll have a chance to visit. These are some of the names reported to be present at the campus. Counselors: Arch Manning of Texas, Trinidad Shamos of Ole Miss, Gunnar Stockton of Georgia, Marcel Reed of Texas A&M University, and Kamario Taylor of Mississippi State University. So those are the SEC quarterbacks. We'll have a chance to talk with folks like Julian Sayin, Ohio State, CJ Carr of Notre Dame, Jaden Mavia, I guess it is, of USC, Kevin Jennings of SMU, CJ Bailey, North Carolina State, Damon Williams of Washington, Bear Bachmeyer of BYU, Noah Fafita of Arizona, Ryan Brown of Purdue, Alberto Mendoza, we know that name, Mendoza, from Georgia Tech. Now he was at Indiana with his brother Fernando, but he transferred. And then Connor Wakeman, we know that name from Texas A&M. He's now at Houston. So we're going to try to visit with as many as we can within that allotted time of 45 minutes. And that's why when we post these things, you're saying, well, why didn't you talk to so-and-so? Well, we just have the 45 minutes, so we have to pop around like a pogo stick and get as many interviews as we can during that 45-minute session. But it's always interesting, and we really enjoy being there at the Manning Passing Academy. They give us the access on Friday, and then we have the skills competition as well. So we try to film that at nighttime. There's a moving target with a golf cart across the field and then down the sideline for the final throw, the deep throw. So we always like to get some film clips that we'll have posted on our AP As We See It YouTube video channel, and we have those interviews as well with the leading quarterbacks from around the country. But we're also going to be in segment 2 coming up here in a few moments. We're going to be discussing our preseason favorites to win the SEC, and also the surprise team that we think might have a chance to emerge and contend for a college football playoff berth. We know that's the goal. There's still 12 teams in the college football playoff at this time. We know the decision is forthcoming, hopefully around December 1st. The Big Ten and the SEC hold all the authority to make that decision. We don't know if they're going to proceed with the 12 to maintain that with 16 or 24. Excuse me, but we'll find out. So we're going to be right back after these messages with more of AP As We See It in our second segment. We'll be right back after these messages with AP As We See It. Hi, I'm AP Stedham for Greer's Markets. If you're planning a big party or for every day, shop at Greer's for delicious food, beverages, and snacks. Save time and money by checking on Greers.com and use Groceries to Go to get your Greer's groceries delivered. Look at the weekly ad for more information. 29 locations in Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi, serving the region since 1916. Remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it. And we're back with AP As We See It, and we always like to direct our audience to our social media platforms on Facebook, Instagram, and X account. That's my personal one at AP Stedham, and also at AP As We See It. We put the links on there for our interviews, our show, and our YouTube channel for the video portion weekly of the show at AP As We See It, and archive the audio on Spotify. And we also check your local radio stations for the listing of the show. It's usually presented on Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. And we like to, of course, thank our sponsors, Greer's Markets. Remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it. We'd like to delve now into our segment 2. And as I said, we're going to project the couple favorites that we think will win the SEC or be playing in the SEC championship game in Atlanta. But first, we want to tell you about the SEC Media Days. We'll be attending those. That'll be in Tampa, Florida on the 20th. You'll have Kentucky, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Tennessee. The 21st of July, be Auburn, Georgia, South Carolina, Vanderbilt. 22nd will be Alabama, Florida, Ole Miss, Texas A&M University. On the 23rd, Arkansas, LSU, Mississippi State University, and Texas. So that's down in Tampa for the very first time. Looking forward to that trip. And oh, by the way, in the coming weeks, the first week of July, we're going to be covering the Big 12, which will be in Frisco, Texas. That's around Dallas. The second week of July will be in Charlotte for the ACC Football Media Days. Week 3, as I said, SEC in Tampa, Florida. Week 4 will be at the Big Ten in Chicago. So we look forward to covering those 67 teams right here on AP As We See It. All those interviews, it'll be over 130 probably at least. You can watch those. They're players that they bring to the football media days. Most conferences, minimum 2, sometimes 3, and the head coaches, various types of access that we have at these football media days. But we really enjoy becoming aware of all the college football teams in the Power Four. If we could go to all of these conferences, we would, but we can make 4 at this point. So the month of July will be filled up with our travel to the Big 12, the ACC, the SEC, and the Big Ten. So we'll be knowledgeable and give you a little insight to those teams around the country that, as we all know, the SEC will have to contend with these teams through the regular season and into the playoffs. So as we always say in our promo, we always keep an eye on the national college football scene, and we're going to be there to keep an eye on these teams in Dallas, Charlotte, Tampa, and Chicago as well. But anyway, let's get to our first team. The first team I always tell people that I project to be in the conference championship game is Georgia. They win, as I said many times, in spite of themselves. A couple of years ago, they were 90th in rushing, had the most drops, yet they won the conference. They've done it the last 2 years. And Kirby Smart, he's the dean of coaches. He knows how to win and develop players. He doesn't delve into that transfer portal as much as many other teams, but he tries to recruit high-level talent, and they'll keep them around. And this year especially, they had some young players from last year, but they're coming into their own right now. So I think Georgia's going to have a good team. You start with the quarterback, Gunnar Stockton, 2,800-plus yards, 24 TDs, 5 interceptions. He's a good quarterback, played well in the competitive games against the stronger teams. Nate Frazier's the running back. He has 3 other running backs on the bench as well in reserve. So that's a strong part of their offense, the quarterback and running backs. Offensive line reshuffled to some degree. Looking for the Isaiah Kenyon, the Georgia Tech transfer wide receiver, to help that wide receiver core. Taylor, London Humphreys are among the many in that wide receiver room. The tight ends are always deep there. Defensively, I think it's 21 returnees. Watch out for Ellis Robinson, the fourth at the cornerback position. Their punter have Drew Miller, is very good. Peyton Woodring, 54 for 54, the extra points. Field goal, 17 for 19. So the kicking game is solid, and so that's why I think Georgia, until further notice, I'm going to pick them to be one of my favorites to win the SEC. And just checking out their schedule, I checked off 4 games that I thought would be highly competitive. They host Oklahoma on the 26th of September. They're at Alabama on the 10th of October. They have to travel to Oxford, Mississippi on the 7th of November. And then they host Missouri on the 14th. So looking at that schedule, if you can be 2-2 in those games, I'm projecting at least 10 wins minimum. 3-1, of course, they're going to get 11 wins, and they'll be in the championship game, I'm sure. But that just gives you an idea of Georgia. And you have to consider the schedule when you're trying to project and predict and come up with teams that you think will be in this championship situation. So that's why I picked Georgia. Those reasons, the quarterback and the head coach, it looks like a fairly favorable schedule, I think, even though I've checked off 4 games. So now let's go to my second team that I think will have a chance to be a preseason favorite to be in the championship game. That would be Texas under Steve Sarkisian. He has the quarterback, Arch Manning. He played very well at the end of the season. He has the transfer running backs, Raleek Brown from Arizona State and Hollywood Smothers from North Carolina State. The big addition, I think, is Cam Coleman from Auburn, the transfer wide receiver. I love Jermaine Bishop Jr. as well at that position. The offensive line needs to be improved. I think it will. And then also the other big addition in the coaching staff was Will Muschamp to be the defensive coordinator. He'll have to work with the defensive end, the edge rusher, Colin Simmons, out of Duncanville High School in Texas. He was the SEC sack leader with 12. So I think they're going to switch from that bend and break defense to the pressure defense under Will Muschamp. We know that Will is a good defensive coordinator. Texas has some talent, and especially Colin Simmons on that edge. When you could have an individual that can pressure the quarterback, that's a huge positive for your football team because each and every week you know that you're going to be disrupting the pattern, the rhythm of the quarterback and his ability to look down the field on those second and third, fourth options. So I'm high on Will Muschamp being hired as a defensive coordinator and having that leadership ability to galvanize that defense, to switch from the bend and break of the former coordinator to the high-pressure defense. There are special teams that have a new punter, kicker, and snapper. The return game, outstanding. The punt return, Ryan Niblett was number 2 in the country. So Texas will have plenty of offense, good defense, and the special teams return with Ryan Niblett. Looking at the schedule, I checked off the Ohio State game at home, at Tennessee. That's on the 12th of September. September 26th would be at Tennessee. The normal against Oklahoma and Dallas on the 10th of October. They'll have hosting Ole Miss on the 24th of October, and then at LSU on the 14th of November, and at Texas A&M. So that's a very difficult schedule. If you're looking at that's 6 games I have checkmarked that could go either way. So you're looking at you're trying to be 4-2 in those particular games, 4-2 or better. I think we'll get you to that 10-2 record and into the conference championship. Now we're going to look at the next team we think might be a surprise. Missouri, 8-5 last year, I believe, but Austin Simmons is a transfer quarterback from Ole Miss. He was the starting quarterback and was injured, and then Trinidad Chambliss came on board to replace him, and it was all over for Austin Simmons, so he ended up transferring to Missouri. Eli Drinkwitz, the head coach, he's been very good for the Missouri Tigers. Ahmad Hardy, 1,649 yards, 16 TDs, one of the best running backs in the country, returns. He had the off-the-field injury. We think he'll be back and healthy. We're looking at also the wide receiver position, Caden Lee, the Ole Miss transfer. He's had 100 receptions or so in his career. Caleb Goody is a transfer as well, 18 yards a catch, Cincinnati. The defense, 0 returning starters, so have 11 new starters. The defensive line is a handful of 300-pounders. So Missouri, we think, might be a team that can surprise some people. Now, if you look at Missouri, can they beat these top echelon teams? Let's look at their schedule. I have checked 5 games. Texas A&M, they're hosting them on the 10th of October. They're at Ole Miss on the 17th. The following week, they host Texas November 7th. They're at Georgia on the 14th. And they host Oklahoma to conclude this season. Their big rival that was from the way back when they had the Big 80 and the Big 12. So that is 5 games. Can they go 3-2 in those games? That would, I think, get them to 10 wins. I'm glossing over those other opponents, believing they can win. So can they reach that 3-2 against those 5 opponents? That would put them at 10-2. May not get them in the playoffs. May not. May not get them in the championship game for the SEC, but may get them in the playoffs. So Missouri's a team. We're going to watch them. Austin Simmons, going to have a chance to see him. He's very smart. He's out of South Florida. He was highly recruited, graduated high school early, but we'll see if he can make the grade with Eli Drinkwitz, and he usually does a good job with his quarterbacks and his offense. He has an outstanding running back to fall back on and rely on. Ahmad Hardy making a lot of yards and keeping the defense busy, which would open up the passing game for him. So those are the 2 teams we favor. Georgia is always in the contention to be in the championship game of the SEC and make the playoffs. Texas, with the $47 million roster. And oh, by the way, I don't think Georgia's even in the top 10 for their roster numbers. It's not been reported. So Kirby Smart does an outstanding job coaching that team. And then Missouri, we think, might be a surprise team in the SEC to either make the championship game of the league or at a minimum make the college football playoff. So we're going to be back after these messages with more of AP as we see it, and our very special guest, Blake Toppmeyer, USA Today Network Senior National College Football columnist. We'll be back right after these messages with AP as we see it.
Hi, I'm AP Stedham for Greer's Markets. If you're planning a big party or for every day, shop at Greer's for delicious food, beverages, and snacks. Save time and money by checking on Greers.com and use Groceries to Go to get your Greer's groceries delivered. Look at the weekly ad for more information. 29 locations in Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi, serving the region since 1916. Remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it.
And we're back with AP as we see it, and our very special guest, friend of the show, Blake Toppmeyer, Senior National College Football columnist, USA Today Network. Welcome to AP as we see it, Blake.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Hey, Blake, you've been having some fantastic stories. I've been reading about the proposed legislation in college football. What strikes you as something that's going to happen, and can they pass this legislation in this short window in July?
Yeah, I think it's still going to be difficult. Obviously, Senator Cruz is putting forward a lot of confidence that he thinks he can get the votes to pass the bipartisan bill through the Senate. Of course, even if it passes in the Senate, it would have to pass in the House. As we know, in an election year, things sort of kind of hit a wall, and everything shuts down within a few months of the election. So, I mean, the way I see it, they've got a couple month window here to maybe get this across the finish line before everybody sort of retreats to their respective corners for election time. And after the election, we don't know who's going to control the House and the Senate, which could sort of erect more roadblocks into passing any federal legislation if it doesn't pass now. So the way I see it, this summer is their window. If they are going to get something done, I guess I'm a little bit more skeptical than Senator Cruz is as to this passing and becoming, federal legislation, the law of the land. But we'll see here the next couple months.
Yeah, it's interesting that this has all the dynamics of a national bill where it's regionalized. The senators from Texas, the SEC is against it. All his teams are in Texas, from the SEC, Texas, Oklahoma. And the senator from Washington, her team's in the Big Ten, they're against it. So it's really interesting to see them for the bill, and those two conferences with their schools are against the bill. Did you find that something that surprised you?
Well, I think for Senator Cantwell, the Democrat who's co-written this bill, I think she made it a point from the start to try to take on the SEC and the Big Ten. I think that was one of her prevailing interests in this bill. And, Senator Cruz would say, well, there's other institutions in Texas beyond Texas and Texas A&M, most notably Texas Tech. I mean, this bill to me has Cody Campbell's fingerprints all over it. Cody Campbell, head of the Board of Regents at the institution that was formerly known as Texas Tech, which is now Cody Campbell University. He's been pushing for federal legislation for years now. And, Cruz and Cantwell, the senators, would tell you that they co-wrote this bill, and they may well have. But I'm not alone in thinking that the mega booster in West Texas, Cody Campbell, the oil tycoon, has his fingerprints all over this and openly says he wants this to pass. So, as Senator Cruz says, there are more institutions than just the two SEC schools in his state. And again, I think the notable one in his state is Texas Tech when it comes to this bill, because Cody Campbell, one thing he has pushed for a long time now is the pooling of media rights. Media rights money is not pooled right now in college sports. The Big Ten has their deal, the SEC has their deal with the respective media partners, and on down the line. And the Big Ten and the SEC, as we know, are the richest conferences. And so the pooling of media rights could conceivably be much better for Big 12 and ACC institutions than it would be for Big Ten and SEC institutions. And that's one of the reasons why the SEC and Big Ten oppose this bill, is that it lays out a pathway for the pooling of media rights, which those two conferences do not support.
Yeah, I don't foresee them sharing the money. I mean, I always bring up the historical reference of the NFL where Pete Rozelle came on board, I think it was around 1960, and they had these deals all over the country independently. And then he said, no, we're going to have one TV deal, and then everything proceeded from there. And we know what happened with the NFL in the last 50 or 60 years. But do you get a sense that could ever happen, of pooling of media rights?
I think it could if the conferences went away, or if the conferences and their commissioners were not such power brokers in the sport. I mean, in the NFL, can you name the NFC commissioner? That's a joke. There isn't. There isn't one. There is no AFC commissioner. There's no AFC West commissioner. The conferences, they don't really matter in the NFL in the same way that they do in college football. I mean, that is, everybody wants to compare college football to the NFL. We hear coaches and ADs say all the time, why don't we do it more like the NFL do it? Well, there really is no comparison between these enterprises at all, other than the fact that they both play a game with an oblong oval-shaped ball. That is really where the comparisons between the NFL and college football begin and end. There's no other comparisons between these enterprises. The NFL is a cohesive league that operates under one shield with a collective bargaining agreement with employees as the workforce. The players are employees as the backbone of the workforce. College football is not like that at all. There's not one league under one shield. There's all these different conferences in a dog-eat-dog world. There's no collective bargaining agreement. The athletes are not designated as employees. I mean, there's just no comparison at all. The college football model is set up around the academic calendar. The NFL doesn't have to worry about the academic calendar. I mean, in every way, shape, or form, college football and the NFL are different. Now, if they got more similar down the road and the conferences went away, or at least retreated in power and their commissioners retreated in power, I could see a situation in which you saw the pooling of media rights, because it is better for the league as a whole if you pool media rights. But there is no league in college football. There's no CFL. Well, there's a Canadian Football League, but there's no college football league. If we got to a point where there was a college football league and you didn't have these conference commissioners, et cetera, then I could see that. But in the current structure, no, I have a hard time seeing the Big Ten or the SEC saying, yeah, suddenly we're on board with pooling media rights.
Would you dispel the myth that they could have a czar for college football? I don't see those commissioners relinquishing their power.
Again, in the current structure, there's going to be no czar for college football, because the commissioners are not going to allow that. They're not going to say, yes, Nick Saban or whoever, you now have more authority than us. Why would they say that? They don't have to. They don't benefit from it in any way, shape, or form. Again, any conversation about a college football czar, to me, the linchpin of that conversation would have to be the conferences going away, or their commissioners surrendering power, which I think we're a long ways away from either of those things happening.
Yeah, fairy tales can come true. I don't think that's the way of the czar to college football. Yeah, that's something we learned in grammar school. We were all behind grammar school. Yeah. The super conferences, I'm kind of glad that they're not going to let them have super conferences. What are your thoughts about denying them that power?
I think the way a super conference would form is not really the way that it's addressed in this bill. So I almost think it's a moot point. Like, I would agree with you. I don't love the idea of like the Big Ten and the SEC merging to create a super conference, but I just don't think that's the way it would happen. I think the way it would happen if this were going to take place would be something like the college football league that I'm talking about, where conferences don't really create a super conference. They bring in private equity, they get away from the old conference model, and they create something totally separate that doesn't really exist right now. Like the top 40 brands, regardless of conference, would all come together under one shield, call it the College Football League or the Ted Cruz Football League, since he's very interested suddenly in college sports. Call it whatever you want. And you would just have 40 brands under one shield. And is that a super league that is prevented from this legislation? We would probably have to have some legal scholars on this podcast to tell us that. But the way I read it, I don't know that this legislation would necessarily prevent anything like that. It would probably prevent a strict Big Ten and SEC merger, which I don't think they're going to do anyway. I think if you ask Tony Petitti, does he want to merge with Greg Sankey's league, he would say no, and vice versa, right? Neither one of those guys are, no. I don't think, want to do that. So what this legislation would do, again, I think it's sort of a moot point, because if a super league would form, I think it would look unlike what we have now in the conference structure. I think the conferences would go away, and I think you would end up with something like a college football league, 40 teams split into like NFL type divisions.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Blake, can you tell our audience where they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. All my columns appear at usatoday.com. toppmeyer.com. You can also find me on X. My handle is at @btoppmeyer, and my columns also publish all across the country in any USA Today owned newspaper, of which they are all over the South, but the easiest way, usatoday.com.
Okay, and we're going to be right back and continue our discussion with Blake Toppmeyer, the senior national college football columnist for USA Today Network. And we'll be right back after these messages with more of AP as we see it.
Hi, I'm AP Stedham for Greer's Markets. If you're planning a big party or for every day, shop at Greer's for delicious food, beverages, and snacks. Save time and money by checking on Greers.com and use Groceries to Go to get your Greer's groceries delivered. Look at the weekly ad for more information. 29 locations in Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi, serving the region since 1916. Remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it.
And we're back with AP as we see it on our very special guest, Blake Toppmeyer, the senior national college football columnist for USA Today Network. Blake, when you look at the bill, the one thing I also approved of was the fact that they're trying to protect the Olympic sports, the women's sports, and the non-revenue sports, because I just think when Arkansas tried to disband the tennis teams that had been around for 71 and 46 years respectively, you were saying that you couldn't afford $2.5 million. Heck, they're probably paying the water boy more than that.
Yeah, the interesting I have some pushback on that, AP, because my issue is the federal government is trying to enforce a cap on American citizens without collective bargaining.
Yes.
I cannot think of very many, if any, instances where the federal government caps a group of people's ability to earn money without a CBA. Everybody would say, well, there's a salary cap in the NFL and the NBA and the NHL. Sure, there is. The federal government does not institute that.
Yes.
The collective bargaining agreement institutes that. It's not your senators saying you can only make so much money in those situations. In this situation, it would be that. If this bill is passed, the federal government would be capping the earning potential of college athletes, American citizens. But they seem very interested in saving tennis programs. Now, I'm not going to celebrate the elimination of any sports program, and I feel for the affected athletes. But what I find really interesting, AP, is has anyone looked at the rosters of those tennis programs? They are loaded with international athletes.
International, yes.
Yes. And I think international students, they're obviously great for campus diversity. There's a lot of arguments to have international students on your campus. They can improve the college experience. But it is interesting to me to see senators fighting so vigorously to cap the earning potential of American citizens in exchange for protecting the competition rights of foreign athletes on American college campuses. To me, that doesn't add up. Again, I'm not celebrating the elimination of any college teams, but when you look at those teams that were affected, look at Louisiana Monroe's women's tennis team that was dropped this time last year. The final roster for ULM women's tennis had 8 international players, 0 American-born players. The players on that team included an audio pronunciation guide accompanying the roster so you would know how to pronounce their names. Illinois State cut its men's tennis team after this season. Its final roster, 7 international players plus 1 guy from Indiana. How about the final North Dakota women's team roster? They cut their team after this season. The final roster of North Dakota tennis. Do you think there were any players from North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin, Iowa on that roster? No, there were not. There were 8 international players and no American-born players. I don't have a problem with that. What I do have a problem with personally is elected officials capping the earning potential of American citizens without a collective bargaining agreement while they fight vigorously to protect competition opportunities in our country for international athletes. And Ted Cruz said he's really worried about the future of the Olympics if some of these sports go away.
Yes.
Ted Cruz said he doesn't want to watch an Olympics where every gold medal goes to Russia and China and Americans are not able to compete because they've devastated some of these sports. Well, again, I just rattled off the composition of these rosters. In fact, NCAA sports does a lot to help the Olympic pursuits of athletes from all kinds of countries, not just the United States. And also, to Cruz's point, College Sports Inc. is indeed the engine behind Team USA, particularly the summer Olympics, and NCAA opportunities do contribute to the Olympic pursuits of numerous athletes. I would point out, though, that the U.S. government does not fund Team USA. It is privately funded.
Yes.
And because Cruz mentioned Russia and China, notably, Russia and China do not pin their Olympic hopes to the collegiate system. Unlike the United States, the governments in Russia and China heavily invest in their nation's Olympic pursuits. So I think there's some untold parts of that story that you're not hearing from the senators whose names are on this bill.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely not for capping anyone. I had a chance to ask Mike Krzyzewski, the former Duke basketball coach, if he was for capping coaches. I said, we're trying to cap the players. And he said, no, this is America. I don't want to cap anybody. So I'm not for capping anybody unless you have some type of collective bargaining. I'll agree with you 100% with that sentiment, Blake. Blake, let's move on to the SEC. I wanted to ask you, do you have any couple favorites for the SEC this season?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be boring here, AP, and I think
that's okay.
I think the favorites are Georgia and Texas.
That's right.
I think Texas's roster is loaded. That Texas schedule, though, is also pretty loaded. I mean, there's not a lot of easy draws in the SEC, but the Texas schedule, to me, tilts toward the harder end of the spectrum, which is going to make it more difficult on them to win the conference. But I think if you're just looking at talent, roster construction, I really like the Texas roster. Of course, I liked their roster last year, and they fizzled last year. They had some marquee wins. They also had that costly loss in the swamp, and they didn't live up to expectations overall last year. Doesn't mean they won't do it this year in Arch Manning's second full season as starter. So I like Texas. Don't love that schedule, though. And then with Georgia, Georgia, it's been a few years now since they've won a playoff game, but they're still kings of the SEC, winning those SEC championship games. If I've got to pick a coach to win a conference title at this point, the way the conference is constructed, seeing the coaches in this league and the teams in this league, I like Kirby Smart in Georgia as much as anybody. If you remember, AP, that 2024 recruiting class that Kirby signed. So these would be guys that are now third-year players, either juniors or redshirt sophomores. That 2024 recruiting class was loaded with blue chippers, 5-star, 4-star guys. And Kirby, as we know, still is very heavy on that sign and develop model. He's not as deep into the portal as a lot of his peers are. And so now it's going to be kind of make or break time, I think, for that 2024 class, and see, did it pay off, signing and developing that Bollywood 2024 class. And I think it could pay off. There's nobody better still at signing and developing high school talent than Kirby Smart. Now, the game has changed around him. It's leveled the playing field. All those things are true, but I don't think that necessarily means that Kirby's model is bust. And I think it could pay off with those third-year players, some of those guys really coming into their own and flourishing, and that 2024 class paying off for Georgia this year. Plus, I think Gunnar Stockton, that guy's a winner. He's a gamer. I know words like that, words like gamer sometimes is used almost as a dig. I don't think it's a dig at all. No. Stetson Bennett, he was a winner and a gamer, and Georgia won national championships with that guy. Well, I think Gunnar Stockton has a higher ceiling than what Stetson Bennett did for as good of a college quarterback as he was. And also Gunnar Stockton's arm, I think, is really underrated. He's a winner. He's a gamer. He's all those things. He's mobile. This guy can throw some ropes too. He made some big passes last year. He elevated his play in a lot of the biggest games on the schedule. So I like the talent around him. I think they could have used another guy at wide receiver, maybe is the one critique. But overall, I like what Georgia's got.
Yeah, Georgia wins in spite of themselves. A couple years ago, they were 90-something in rushing, and they had the most drops, and they're still winning the conference. So until further notice, I tell people, as you did, Georgia, and then I'll throw Texas in there because of their almost $50 million roster and the addition of Cam Coleman and Arch Manning, he seems to be much improved by the end of last season. So I'll agree with you on those two selections. Any surprise team you have, Blake? Anybody you're thinking maybe they haven't made the playoffs or they're trying to get back into the playoffs from the SEC?
Well, I don't necessarily see him as a playoff team, but I think Auburn will start the season unranked. And with new coach Alex Golish, who brought a lot of players with him from South Florida, including his quarterback, Byron Brown, I think Auburn could take a notable leap this year. This is a program that's been spinning its tires, and I was going to say mediocrity, but mediocrity might be putting it too kindly for what's happened to Auburn the last 6 years.
Right.
I think Alex Golish is going to be an improvement on the two predecessors that were there at Auburn. Brian Harsin was a disaster in every way, shape, or form, and I thought Hugh Freeze would be a solid hire. I was wrong on that one. It didn't work for Hugh Freeze at Auburn. I think Golish is going to be an upgrade. Of course, he coordinated the offense at Tennessee in that 2022 season with Hendon Hooker, where the Vols had such a special year. He did a nice job at South Florida. It's undeniably a big leap to go from Group of Five to the SEC. You never know how that's going to work, but I do like that he brought so many of his USF players with him. People will compare that to Kurt Signetti bringing a lot of JMU guys to Indiana. Doesn't mean Alex Golish is going to win a national championship in year two at Auburn, but I think it does mean Auburn can be much better this season and maybe be by the end of the year kind of claiming a spot toward the bottom of the top 25 and exceeding expectations, after so many years where they've really kind of been down in the dumps.
Yeah, I think I'll agree with you that he brought his quarterback who was very productive with the 42 touchdowns, 28 passing, 14 rushing. So I'll agree with you that the quarterback and the head coach, those are two big pieces to the puzzle. The team I'm looking at maybe is Missouri, Austin Simmons moving over there. Eli Drinkwitz's been winning 10 games or so. He's pretty reliable, but we'll see if he can get to the playoffs. But anyway, hey, Blake Toppmeyer, the senior national college football columnist from USA Today Network. We want to thank you so much. And we'd like to thank our sponsor, Greer's Markets, 29 locations, Alabama, Florida, Mississippi. And remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it. So that's the episode this week for AP As We See It. And we'll be back next week with another edition of AP As We See It. Thank you so much. Thank you, Blake.
Thank you, AP.
Hi, I'm AP Stedham for Greer's Markets. If you're planning a big party or for every day, shop at Greer's for delicious food, beverages, and snacks. Save time and money by checking on Greers.com and use Groceries to Go to get your Greer's groceries delivered. Look at the weekly ad for more information. 29 locations in Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi, serving the region since 1916. Remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it.